three gentlemen to my left have been making incredible music for 40 years, two of them for 30 years, the third one, I guess, more or less. They're the Fringe. They're from Boston, Massachusetts. Rich Appleman is the departed member. Bob Gulloti on drums.
Hello.
George Garzone on tenor. John Lockwood on bass. And I was going to say, I was saying to Bob, I remember the 5th anniversary concert of the band at Michael's Pub.
Whoops.
And the 20th anniversary at the Somerville Theater. And now it's 41 years, something like that.
Yeah, 41.
So there's a lot of history, and at the risk of John falling asleep while we talk about some of the early history, I thought a good way to start would be for Bob and for George to talk about how they initially got together, what brought them together.
Well, George and I met actually a year before we started the group. We were playing in an R&B group, and then we just started to do some sessions at my apartment. It wasn't the trio, it was whoever I invited, but sometimes we couldn't get piano players or guitar players, and so it kind of just turned into a trio, and the three of us at the time was George and I and Rich Appleman. Pretty much every week we played, and then I don't know, maybe for a year or two it was just sessions, and then I don't know why it happened. Maybe George remembers, but we got asked to play on WBUR, Steve Ellman and Rob Battle's show, which was a late night, all night radio show, and we ended up playing on that many times. And then the owner of Michael's Pub in Boston, which is now long gone, but he invited us to start a residency at his club. And that was probably 39 years ago. So we're still going.
Let me ask you about, you obviously have parallel interests in very spontaneous and free music, and where that developed in each of you, even before the Fringe.
Well, I listened to it a lot when I was a kid. But as far as the group starting, when we first started playing, we played tunes, normal jam session type stuff. But then we sort of got into doing long endings. So it started from long endings, and then we'd start the next tune with the long ending. And then eventually we just played. Yeah.
Okay.
I had no, when I went to Berkeley, that was my first real introduction to jazz. But it wasn't until, I met Bob and I started to go to his house. I had no idea about the improvisation of free music. And we started listening to like Albert Ayler and Ornette Coleman and Charles Mingus. And that was my awakening to all of that. So it was good because it hipped me to this whole other side, because I grew up in a family of musicians that were really big band people. So when I met, Bob and Rich, they were much more progressed about what they were listening to, so I would just tag along. But I think a lot of the reason that we ended up playing the way we played is because we drank too much vino.
A lot of vino.
Gambino.
Okay. Now, when you got what you call the residency, which was like an every Monday night thing, did you decide that there were certain rules that the band was going to follow, like
No.
don't play tunes or only
never.
play certain tunes?
Never had rules. That's one thing we've never had. That's the rule. No rules.
Like I know John wanted to get band uniforms and like a PA
Had it
system.
all arranged.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really. I mean, people, they would say to us, like, what's the secret to keeping a band together? And I just figured, I said, don't try.
Right.
You got to get it to the point where, you don't try. You come, and if the strength of the music is strong enough, that will keep the guys coming back. It's like, I told Locke, he said, when I wanted him in the band. I mean, I wanted him in. So I said, look, if you can't make a gig, don't worry about it. Bob and I will play duo. I wanted, so he knew that he didn't need to come every Monday night. But it's like the mafia. Once you're in, you can't get out.
They keep dragging you back. You miss a Monday.
Right, Gambino?
What about the name, The Fringe? How did you come up with the name?
Yeah, I came up with the name. I think one day we were playing at my apartment, which was a great place to play because my landlord lived upstairs. He was completely deaf, so we could play and play and play and play. It was great. But he was walking across the top of my sofa on the Fringe to fall. You know, so that's pretty much where it came from. Nothing deep.
Okay. And, you know, I mean, you're asked to play at Michael's and you play, but most bands, they're offered a night, you know, play a night, and maybe in a few months we'll bring you back. Well, they offered you a regular weekly thing from the jump?
Pretty much from the beginning. He said, you guys have Monday if you want it, so we took it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, so the first crisis, if that's the right word, must have been when Michael's closed. And you had to, I mean, what was the process then for the band?
I remember they were going to close, and it was like such a monumental closing. That last moment, I remember we were just playing those last few notes, and then it closed, and then Bob called me and said, let's go look around. So one night we got in the car and we drove around trying to find a gig. We didn't find any, but it was like right, you know, Boston's small, you know, but right after that is when Brian Walkley
Yeah.
called and said, hey, do you guys want to play this club in Somerville? And I'm like, oh my God, my Uncle Pete lives there. You know, and the whole history of Somerville, Winter Hill Gang. I was like, yeah, we'll do that. So we went down there, and let me back up. The thing about Michael's too is once we started playing down there, like all the musicians, once they saw that we were playing there, they felt it was cool to play there. And I remember Billy Pierce came down, Alan Dawson played with Bill, and people felt it was a scene because we were there every week, and we toughed it out when there was no one in the audience, but the place was really funky, and no one said like, hey, can you play something inside? So.
But it was a good location because it was in walking distance from Berkeley and the conservatory.
Absolutely.
So the musicians had easy access to you guys.
I have cassette tapes of Jackie Byard sitting in on alto because he didn't want to play piano. He's like, can I play alto? I'm like, really? You play alto? Yeah. And he would sit in on alto, and then John Neves would come down every week, and Miroslav Vita. So cats were coming in. I mean, we were young, and I think they liked the music, I think they heard we were just trying to go for it, and without thinking about, what we should be doing.
When you started, was the music clicking right away, or was it just that three guys who liked each other and would keep pushing? I mean, when did the music really sink in?
All right, Johnny. You answer that one.
Well, I came after the fact. I mean, you talking about in the beginning, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about when you guys, I can see three friends saying, it's nice to get together every week and play,
Yeah.
but I can also see people saying,
No, I
hey,
think-
we've got something happening.
I think it
here.
was pretty special right from the beginning. Yeah, it was something that the egos were out of the room, and we respected each other's attempts at things without busting each other's eggs, and in friendship, and like you said, the vino.
It's all about the music. I mean, music decides who is going to be together. Music decides, what band is going to last. Music breaks up bands, music puts bands together, but the music that we were playing, even back then, was so powerful that it would draw you in. You would go there. You'd go there because I knew that for the rest of the week I wouldn't play at that level. And then when, we were in the transitional period, and then I had played a few gigs with John, I said to Gulloti, I said, man, this is the cat. This is the cat. This is the cat. And then, I said, John, come down and play. And then after a while, he realized we weren't playing tunes. You think we were going to play tunes? Did you at the beginning or something?
I can't remember those days too well.
Anyway, I told him, I said, Locke, there's no tunes. We don't have, music stands and paper. We just get up and go. And then once he came in, because I had been to South Africa and I met all his friends in Cape Town, and they talked about if I knew Locke, and I was like, no, I didn't know him. Then I go back, and like within 6 months, I meet the cat, and we just knew that he was the guy.
Okay. John, tell us about how you came to Boston from South Africa, and had you heard the Fringe before you joined in its original configuration?
No, well, actually, in South Africa, it was weird because we were playing straight ahead, and there was this great bass player named Midge Pike, and he got us into this free playing. And it got into a thing. Sometimes we'd have sometimes we'd start a thing with, say, 5 to 6 people, and then sometimes the symphony guys would come, they sit in with us after their gig, and then we'd sometimes have the cats from the townships or the penny. It was just wild. And then when I came to Boston, I thought I'd be doing something of the same thing, and most people were playing straight ahead. And then I became aware of these guys, and sometimes Rich couldn't make a night, and then they called me to sub. And that's how it kind of came from there.
Okay. Now, Rich Appleman, who was the original bass player, left about 10 years in because he became the chairman of the bass department at Berkeley. And I wonder if you could talk about just your feelings. Was that another crisis point, like Michael's closing, or how you got through that?
Yeah, there was a crisis because his chair at the school, and he was also doing a lot of theater, and so he had a hard time doing any traveling, and we were just beginning to get calls to go to Europe and stuff, and he really didn't want to do that. He didn't want to jeopardize his situation, so we had to make the change. Yeah, it was a crisis, but we're still friends and everything's cool. But once John joined, in, I think it's 1984, then we knew we could, if we get a call to go here or go there, there's never an issue,
Okay.
So it's
I still look at him as part of the band. His persona, his vibe, and he's so Altoona, Pennsylvania. I think it was actually, I went there one time. Well, we knew his father and his mother. His persona was so strong. I never really, whatever happens, happens. But it's like when people pass, they go, but they're still there.
Mm-hmm.
So he's still here, and he just retired. He was, Locke was working for him, and I'm glad he retired. Because it was.
yeah, he did 40 years at Berkeley.
Oh.
It's like he
He
started.
did, yes. It's
He
like
started
doing
when
time.
we started playing, and then he finished when we celebrated the 40th. It was kind of it's
Nice
interesting.
symmetry to it.
Yeah, it was interesting. But he, good cat. I remember playing these all-night sessions on BUR, and you remember any of that? Where they would go all night. You'd play just all night. We'd go up in the studio and just pack some serious.
We had to play in the hallway so there'd be reverb.
Okay.
Because they didn't have it yet.
That was a real training ground for me, because I'm not a night person. Like, I don't stay up all night because when the sun comes out, I feel like I did something wrong, like a vampire or something. But, so then, we'd be playing, and then we'd go outside. It was like, oh my God. And I remember BUR used to be near the hospitals, down on that street, and I used to see all the nurses going in to start work, and we were just finishing, There's things you remember,
Yeah. John, could you talk a little about becoming part of the band and the musical challenges, if any, for when you finally decided to come aboard?
Well, as I said, Rich used to get these gigs, so I used to go and sub it every now and then, so I kind of got my feet wet. And this was quite a few years that this would happen. And then when he decided to leave, it just was like a kind of sliding in there. It was great. It was a great release.
Now, when you go on the bandstand, nothing is planned? Something is planned? Nothing is planned?
Nothing.
Do you get together at the end of a performance and talk about what happened?
No. Talk
The only
about
thing
food. We talk about food.
Right in my hand, I have the tickets to go get dinner.
Okay.
After that, that's what we're thinking about, to go have dinner, after this is all. But, I mean, we play this music because it allows us not to think. And I was talking about that in the clinic about cut thinking is a Zen concept where you don't think. So if we don't think, we don't need to talk about it. We've been doing it so long. Sometimes we talk about things that might have happened during the week, get that out, and then when we start to play it, we just cleanse everything. But it's really not necessary, and I like it.
Okay. So you never say, gee, that set 3 weeks ago really killed, and that was one of our better. Okay.
No, I mean, if there's a special event, we'll say, yeah, that was a good hit, but nothing specific about the music.
To me, for me to say this is like every time we play, it's the highest level. I don't think we've ever had a bad night, like, oh, that really sucked. It doesn't happen, not at this level. So if you go in with that attitude that it's going to be great every time, it is. And, I'm not going to bring up something that happened before, because as soon as this music stops tonight, it's done, Then we move on. We all split up. He goes back to Beantown, Johnny goes. So it's just like a dispersion,
Okay. What about, you say people have sat in with the band. Any particularly, I'm not going to ask you about who was really out of water, but any people who really just sort of blended right in where you said, boy, they really understand what it's about?
Yep. Joe Lovano has played with us, recorded with us.
Kenny Warner.
And Kenny Warner, absolutely no, they already knew.
And those two guys.
Liedman and.
Okay. Well, Liedman, I was going to say those two guys, same age, same educational background.
Yeah.
Dave, same age, a little older, but not a Berkeley person. Do you think it's traced back to that period when you were all learning music, that kind of open-minded feeling, or that they would be able to fit in so well?
I think they're just such good players, man. They can adapt to any situation they get involved with. Kenny is, and Joe and Lieb and cats at that level, they've heard it all, they've played it all, and then this is just another avenue for them to play their thing. And we don't usually have too many people sit in, especially if someone has an agenda. Then it's.
They like to play with us because they know the criteria is no criteria, but they also know that they can sit in with us, but it's different. And they know this, it's different than when we play trio. It's not better or worse, but it's what we do with everyone or anyone who plays, but then they know what we do. Like when Lovano comes to play, he never rips out his horn and jumps on the bandstand. He'll always wait for a while. And when he first started doing this, it was a little creepy for me. I'd start playing, and he wasn't coming in, and then I'd look, and he's sitting on a piano bench just checking it out. And it was kind of creepy, Then I realized he's just watching it and letting it go, and, to see where it's going to go, because they know the nucleus of what we do is really the trio. And then when they come in, it makes it even better. But like Bobby said, we don't let too many people sit in, because it's, it changes it. No matter who plays, it changes it. And I'm cool with that. But if it goes in a direction that we don't like, it can get nasty. You don't want to be in between these two guys when they get sad.
Is there a way to turn people in the moment musically when it's
Turn
going in the wrong direction?
What do you think, Johnny?
Well,
He does it the best.
John starts
I'll take the bow out.
Yeah. No, it's like sometimes I've had to say, no, and then people want to challenge me. It's and if you say no is a very heavy word. I've only learned this word recently. when you say no, no is a challenge of people's credentials. If people are strong about what they do, then they let it go. But if you say no, they've been told no before, so that they think, you think they're not qualified to get up there. But if you listen, if you're in the audience and you listen to this music, and you actually think you want to get up there and take a chance, you're freaking crazy. Because if I was sitting there listening to this band play, I wouldn't get up and play with these guys. Just how they look. You know. No, I wouldn't, really. I mean, if you were to say, like, if I was thinking, like, oh, maybe I want to sit in with these guys. I had someone do that in New York, and it was so dumb. He's like, man, can I sit in with you guys? I'm like, no. And he challenged me, you know. I said, man, no, because he said, but this is New York, and everybody sits in. I said, but no one sits in with this band, and he didn't understand that.
Okay.
You know, and it's not an ego thing. We're not into that. It's just, you know, I can't donate this time for this organization because if it goes to that negative place, it hurts me. You know, it's just how it is. You know.
Yeah. Have each of you had to turn down what might be steady gigs out of loyalty to the band? Has that ever come up?
No.
No.
It's money for it. No, I'm no. Like I said, we have this understanding that, you know, we could, if Bobby had to get up there and play by himself all night, he could do it. Locke could do it. I could do it. You know, John just had a commitment, so, you know, he had to do that. We went to Brazil and played duo. We missed him like crazy. I cried all night. But we still did it, you know. It's not an issue. I want this band, well, they know that. I want them to know that if you need to do something else, it's cool. If I had to come here and play solo, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
You know?
Now, earlier Bob mentioned no egos, which is, I mean, it's a great concept, but it's hard to realize. And sometimes as a band gets a little recognition, it becomes harder. Sometimes when suddenly you are going to Europe and you are going to Israel, because I know you made a CD there, in Portugal where you recorded a CD, and you're getting around and you're getting a little rep and everything. I would assume that maintaining that no egos thing gets a little more difficult, or am I wrong?
No,
Yeah,
I don't
you're
think
wrong.
so. I think that because we all have similar ideas in the day, we just hang out, eat, drink, go running, whatever we've got to do. And it's just it's like a family feeling more than anything. So it doesn't get in the way at all.
What about, I mean,
Yeah, I see what you mean, but
well, the other thing when you said music keeps bands together, but the extra musical can often break bands up. You know, things that the greatest bands, and you wonder, well, why didn't they stay as a unit? And it often isn't the music, it's often some business thing or whatever.
yeah, it's usually people want to be the leader of their own group.
Right.
We just want to play trio. You know, John might put a band together, I might put a band, George might put a band together, but the Fringe is the trio. And so therefore, that element of it doesn't even exist. You know, I mean, there's ego, but it's positive. You know, there's never, well, you know, I want to be the leader. And that's why bands break up a lot of times, is a sideman starts to get a lot of recognition, he wants to do his own thing, which is fine. But we've always been able to keep the core. That keeps it free of that crap.
Now, you've had to move your venue a couple of times. And I assume each time it gets a little, I mean, you know, now we're the Fringe, we'll find someplace eventually. Is that the way it works?
Yeah, it has.
Just kind of
We did
evolved.
Michael's, I think, for 9 years, and then
9, yeah.
and then
I mean, think
Willow
about
for
it.
17.
3 venues in 40 years.
4, well, actually, we had the lizard.
Before you were
Lounge,
the
yeah.
Lizard,
Wait,
too,
let me think about
right?
it.
Lizard,
Michael,
yeah.
Lizard, Willow. I mean, Michael's,
Willow, Lizard.
this one. So 4 venues in
40 years.
40 years. So that's 10 years of venue average. That's pretty good.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, people don't throw us out because, you know, they know that we draw. And it's not like, you know, we draw because, you know, the kids, the students, and everyone gets overwhelmed by the music, you know. But I just wanted to say, it's kind of out there, but I think all bands are predetermined from a higher force, you know, somewhere up, you know, up there someone determines how he's going to play, how he plays, how I plays, and people up there determine who's going to stay together. You know, what bands are going to play, what units are going to be successful. I don't look at success because no one has a group like this, you know. I mean, you think about the MJQ, right, the Rolling Stones, you know, things like that. There's only a few groups that have been together for 40 years. So success to me is just being together. I mean, this sound we have is been nurtured from staying together, you know.
Now, is Jerry Bergonzi also part of the Monday night thing?
Yeah.
Right.
So it's like two bands. You get two legendary bands for the price of one,
Yeah,
basically.
they play from 8 to 10, we play 10:30.
Okay, and it's at the Lily Pad
Yeah,
in Inman Square?
yeah.
So if anybody's ever in Boston on a Monday night, unfortunately, there's not a subway stop right there, but it's not that far from the Central Square Red Line stop. And as I say, two legendary ensembles are there. And that's because, again, Jerry is somebody of your generation,
And he does play with us, too. Sometimes he'll hang and...
Sometimes the whole band will play with us.
Yeah, sometimes
Yeah,
he'll
we
come
had,
down.
remember years ago, we had the group Gargones.
right, yeah.
And that's what we're trying to put that back together, but everyone's so busy. You know, that's going to it's been happening. Once in a while, Jerry stays, and then Luther plays, and Will plays with Locke. And it's just an interconnection with Phil, because, you know, everybody, the whole thing is so high level that people want to be around the sound. It's not about playing tunes or playing free. It's just about playing, you know.
Do you hear other bands, either active or over the last 40 years, that you got the same feeling from, that they were operating in the same way of like openness and no rules on the front, that you said, not that they're imitating us, but
Yeah.
we're sort of in the same zone?
No, not me.
Well, I knew there was a Fringe in South America. You know, these kids come to Berkeley, then they go back and start a Fringe, which is cute. I like that. I don't really like it, but I like it. There's a Fringe in South America, there's a Fringe in Brazil, and then there was a Fringe somewhere else.
Denmark, is it?
Yeah, in Europe. And it's, you know, we have the trademark on the name, and that's because of him. He did that years ago. We have that name is our name. You know, you can't call your group the Fringe. You can, because it's jazz, you know. But you can't make a trademark out of it.
Right.
And then if you do, it's kind of, you know, it's nice because they're trying to replicate what we do. But there were groups in the 70s and 80s, Shock Exchange with Dave Bryan. He ended up going with Ornette. You know, different, and then Scott Robinson.
Yeah.
You know, these cats would come in and they were taking it out too, because in the late 70s, like you knew, there were much more aggressive groups around in Boston.
Right. One thing I just want to point out, in case people don't know it, is that we've talked a lot about the spontaneity of the Fringe, but each one of these musicians can basically play any gig that they're offered. And would you be satisfied if all you did was play the Fringe?
Yes,
You would?
yeah.
Okay.
I'd probably die the next day and go to heaven. I hope I go there. But, yeah, it would be cool because it's a safe haven, you know. I mean, things go on with us, but, you know, it's a safe haven. We're protected by the music. I mean, and I think just playing one night protects us for the rest of the week, you know. And I think the reason it's taking so long is because people are afraid we're going to succeed. But my theory is if you keep banging it down, which is starting to happen now, they have no choice. They got to let you in. And that's what's happening now. Because everywhere I go as an independent, they always ask me about these guys. I said, well, when are you going to bring them? I worked my tail off going to Australia for 4 years, you know, schlepping over there and gigging with the cats until finally I brought them last year. You know?
So you have basically played all over the world at this point, right?
Right.
Have you ever played at home?
We haven't played there. It's been so long since I left there. Yeah.
Yeah, we got to get down there, John. What's that piano player?
Well, we had that. There was one guy who was trying to get us down there, saxophone player.
Played it
He was,
where? Where did you say, Bob? At home.
South Africa is what I
Oh,
got
I
at
thought
home.
you meant home like in
No, that is at his
Lexington.
house.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I have a student, this Italian kid that runs the whole festival in Cape Town, and he's challenging to bring us out there, but between the flights and all that and the tickets, it's a lot. But we need to go there.
Yeah,
I'm going to, and I only realized on Monday that the sets are starting at 8 and not 8:30, so I'm sure that John and George and Bob would appreciate a little extra time for dinner. So I'm going to stop my questions early tonight and see if we can get some from the audience before we finish up here. Anyone? Yes.
Hi, it's great to have you up here. It's
Thank you.
I came from the Boston area too, arrived in '74, and you were, one of the places and one of the groups one went to if you wanted to wake up and see how good your ears were. Can you talk about the audience and the education of your audiences? Because it's not jump in and float music. I mean, you can't just
well, it's
necessarily.
not just. I think over the years the audience has changed because the people change. A lot of the audiences are students, college students, but not all the time. I mean, we have older fans, and they come in whenever they're in town. A lot of our audience, they live in Boston for a number of years, and then they leave. They go do business around the world, whatever they do. But they come home to visit family. They always come in, So, and then because we have traveled quite a bit around the planet, we have audiences in other countries as well, and if they come to visit the U.S., they try to come to Boston and hear the band, and it just keeps. But it changes, like 4 or 5 years, and then you see a new group come in. These guys here are a new group. These 3 here, they're part of our new following right here, and they just went to Berkeley. Now they're graduating, and who knows what they're going to do next? But it's continuous. Yeah, but there's some that have been. This guy over here has been following us for about 35 years, Kevin. So it's both. Yeah.
Yeah, when I first got in the band, actually, I'd been playing a lot of straight ahead stuff, and it was more the musicians that gave me a bit of a hard time. But then later on, they kind of came around too, but it took them longer than a lot of just regular people.
Why'd they give you a hard time? Because you were playing with us?
Because they thought it was too crazy. Like,
What? They think we're crazy?
well, that's we'll leave that one alone.
I think people come to hear us to get sane, because, I mean, I know people that used to come and just sit there, and they weren't even musicians, and they would say like, "Oh, thank you, man. Now I can get through the rest of the week," But I think it's a good moment now for music like this, because people are ready for anything, because so much stuff is happening that they can come and hear this, and they know that even we don't know what's going to happen. So we live in the unsuspected now, and that's what this music is about, and I think it solidifies what's going on at the moment here.
Yeah, plus, I think that there's a lot of negative vibes in the world right now, and I think people come and hear the Fringe because they see a positive thing, and it's just a good counter, Because if you listen to the news or you watch television, man, it's just like endless. So sometimes people will come just to, let me get an escape for a 2 or 3 hours set. And it's usually very positive on the stage, so that sometimes that gets into their bones for at least a few hours.
I just want to add a thought of mine, which is that when you talk about the contemporary scene, there's so much that's by formula and regimented and predictable. And I think there's something very appealing about the organic spontaneity of the band. And and that it works, you know. Not just that people are going to do whatever they're going to do, but they can do it together and make some sense out of it. And that's harder and harder to come by, particularly in music and a lot of what's being presented, you know, the
Formulation,
American
yeah.
Idol or whatever. type
I
thing.
mean, people, when they go to hear music, sometimes, you know, most of the time, Levano was talking about this too. He just hears people, they get up, they play the head, they play the solo, they play the head again, then they go to the next tune. With this being here, you know, we start playing and then something trips us off, and the next thing, I have the audience singing "Fly Me to the Moon," you know, and everybody jumps right in because they felt it was time to do that. So, you know, it's good for them for audience participation,
Okay.
you know, rather than, oh, I'm listening to this really cerebral music.
I think the people actually feel the longevity of the band too, whether it be conscious or unconscious. I think they can feel. They say, "Well, how do you do that? Do that together?" And I guess it's just from being together for so long.
It's like radio.
Radio.
It's like radio.
Any other questions?
Actually, I just have an observation. So I also was in Boston in the 70s, 76. So was at Michael's and at the Willow. And John used to play with everybody. I mean, you know, what used to go see Alan Austin, and he, you know, fronting everybody who came to the town. So here it is, you know, all these years later, like 40 years later, the first time I ever heard him talk. I didn't even know he was from South Africa.
How could you do that?
He's usually mute.
We take him to Rome,
Right.
and my friend Marco, John will talk for about 20 minutes, and then Marco look at me, "Hey, Mama, there you go." And he's asking, "What did he just say?" And I have to explain that he wanted a sandwich made with, no, but
Just not used to the King's English.
Oh,
yeah, it is. It is. I mean, that brogue, this thing that he's talking, well, you know, that accent is Afrikaans, you know, like from being over there and hanging with these people. I spent 6 or 7 weeks over there, and it took me the first 2 to try to figure out what the hell they were talking about, you know. And then I come home, and then within a year or so, end up having him join the band, you know.
Actually, you're talking much better now too.
Pardon me?
You're talking much better now too.
So, guys, why Boston still 40 years later?
why Boston?
Yeah, why did you stick around?
We all have families, and it really doesn't. If you get the stuff going, if you get your career going, it doesn't matter where your home base is, because you just fly to wherever you're going. George lived in New York, back and forth every week for probably 10 or 15 years.
16.
But it's a good town, and we play all the time. And like I said, you can move from there as well as you can take off from anywhere else. So it doesn't matter after a while.
You mentioned it was small. Is there a special vibe of the jazz scene there?
Yeah, Boston has a scene, and we're all involved in it individually, and I think that the band is part of that Boston scene as a unit as well.
I think when you're from Boston, you'll live in Boston, I mean, we're from there, Bergonzi's from there, so there's some, I think about it all the time, and there's some commitment. After that bombing, it made me realize just the history of living in Boston, just the whole thing about it. And, I was always like, I should move to New York. But when that went down, it just kind of woke up the revitalization of why I lived there. I mean, I know I live there because my family's there, my mother's there, and she'd kill me if I moved out of town. But again, I think it's because of the group that keeps us there. And I think people would be really sad if we stopped playing because of location. They would, like even talking to guys in the Vanguard last week playing with the Nine-Head, they just talk about the Fringe. And people never talked about the Fringe too much. Now all of a sudden, they're interested to hear about, what happens.
Yep.
A day job?
No, we're all teachers at the Berkeley College of Music. No.
job, you mean like other than music?
No.
Well,
I knew
I mean, you might teach music for all I know.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we did 1 day, 2 days.
Yeah.
I'm a professional gambler in Las Vegas. I live in Vegas, too. So that's where I make the bulk of my money. The Berkeley gig's just a front.
And you don't like to see the sun come up and you're a gambler?
By the time it comes up, I'm down. No, I mean, that's the other thing, too, like, you know, having Berkeley in the town, we all went to Berkeley, and I taught at one point at 5 or 6 schools my whole life, and I knew that, and I'm saying this in support of the school, I knew that if push came to shove, in the end, it would be that place that I would end up in, and that's what I'm doing now. And, you know, it's a solid institution that, you know, they know what they're doing, and if you're gonna live there, yeah, no, it's great.
One time. We
Yeah.
didn't know that's where you're from, but then it just said, Berkeley. I knew.
Yeah, I mean, I went there in '68, Bob and I, so, you know.
67.
Yeah, it's still there.
I have something. I was at Berkeley in 68, 69, 70, and I had an apartment on Kingsbury Street. So I would go to get a drink, or if I had a date, I'd go to a place called Benjamin's.
Oh.
Where you were with Webster Lewis?
Yeah. You know, he passed away.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Wow, I don't believe that, man. Phew. That's really where I learned to play
Yeah,
with.
you were playing too.
I had the opportunity. I was a young kid. I was 18 years old, and I was a student at Berkeley. But I landed this gig with this really, really good organ player, B3 player, and from DC. And he was getting his master's up in Boston, and we got a 5-night-a-week gig for 4 years. And but that's also when, you know, right after that, during that, we started the Fringe. But wow, you used to go to Benjamin's, huh? Yeah, that was a great gig. I mean, I learned so much, and I met, because he was at the level he was, you know, all the great drummers would come in wanting the gig, and they, "Hey, Bob, let them sit in." Yeah, sure, you know. But he said, "It's your gig." So he liked me. He knew he was helping me.
And he ultimately worked with Tony Williams, didn't he? Right after
Yeah,
that?
yeah. He did some with Tony, and but I got, when the organ players would come to the jazz workshop, they would always come to Benjamin's and sit in. So I got to play half a set with Jimmy Smith and Groove Holmes and all the great organ players, because they all knew him. So that's great you were there. Whew. So we're about the same age then, right?
Were you in the graduating class of '72?
No, I didn't graduate. And I had a band. And I had a problem with Dean Bob
Anything else? Okay, so we're going to thank Bob, George,
All
and
right.
John, the Fringe.
Please come back for the concert tonight. Come
Yeah,
back for the
please
concert.
come back. The concert's at 8, and I'll see everybody later at the concert, but I'll see you from this vantage point tomorrow at 5:30 when Helen Sung will be our guest. So please keep supporting the festival and keep supporting jazz music, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks.